Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I am fine, thank you. And how about you?
Very well, very well. Really excited to have you on the program today. Before we start, if you wouldn't mind giving a bit of a background on yourself, your work, your career, what brought you into the value space, that would be great.
Haha, what got me into the value space? That's a really good question. I've been doing business cases for 20 years as my job, but I was a CIO twice. And when I got my first job as IT responsible, that was for a plow factory. And I was straight out of school. I thought I was really hot and I needed to do all this computer stuff I had all the books about how to do this the right way. And the CEO of this here factory, he just looked at me and he said, "How are you going to make sure that the mainframe doesn't break so that we won't have a disruption in the manufacturing of plows?" And I was like, "Is that a problem?" He said, "Yeah, happens every 2 months. We lose one night. That means we lose one or two plows that should have been sold at a value of whatever a plow cost." So to him, he did not care if we had antivirus in place or we had this, that, or the other, or which ERP system. He was really interested in producing plows. And then as IT responsible, I had all these salespeople show up going, "Oh, I have this product and you see, and I have a calculator and you beep, 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 you're going to save 100 billion." And I'm like, okay, how am I going to save 100 billion? I mean, the most interesting thing was this IBM guy who showed up and said, your budget savings will be 433 million. And I'm like, my budget is 23. How are you going to save 400? My calculator. And,
It's a hell
and
of
it
a
was
profit.
made, yeah. And the calculator is made by some professor or whatever he was. And I was like, yeah, but the numbers are not right. So how did I land in this? I landed in this because I had business people talk to me about how I could improve the business. So my first job was in a plow factory, so steel and welders and smelly stuff and farmers with straw coming out of their shoes. And next place I worked was in a fashion company. So we had t-shirts and dresses and bikinis and all that stuff. And the question really was, how are we going to get the orders out there to India so they make the clothes on time? How do we receive our shipping? How do we store it in the warehouse so that we can find the purple t-shirt size medium really quickly when there is an order for it? So my whole job went from talking about computers and networks and cables and double differentiated Manchester as a protocol, and it didn't matter. What mattered was get the t-shirts into the stores, make sure that we function as a company. And that got me into thinking, how do I talk to my boss about this? How do I show my boss, I'm going to need 1 million to do this? And for you, for me, for the t-shirt factory, if we spend this million, we can do this instead. That's how I got into it. And that thinking has followed me ever since, for better and for worse.
Interesting. And so the foundation is really how do you identify the optimum value and the right relevant value for a business based on its strategic needs, right?
Yes.
And not just some mythical potential savings.
Yes. Or I have so many people show up and say, We need to reduce risk." And I'm like, reduce risk of what? "Oh, we just need to reduce risk, or we need to improve time to market." And I'm like, cool. Improve time to market of what? You are building servers or you are moving data from one database to the other. What is the time to market you need to improve? Because I'm your customer. I go to your supermarket. I buy carrots and ice cream, and I want the ice cream to be frozen and I want the carrots to be fresh and at a decent price. How is you moving data from one database to the other helping me as a customer buy the carrots? And that leads to so many interesting conversations, and it leads to so many of people who think they want to be my customer to deeply regret it. Because once I was talking to this guy and he was from a supermarket and we were talking about how to do stuff better in the data center. And he said, well, they're yelling at me. That's not, is that why you want to fix it? Because they are yelling at you? Who's they? Oh, it's the development team. And I said, okay, the development. So why are they yelling at you? And he crossed his arms and leaned back and said, I don't know. I don't talk to those people. And so I spent I spent 3 days on site with him, and we were going through all these things that we needed to improve. And at some point, I said, you know what? Can we just walk past the development team on our way to lunch and then ask them, why is it you're yelling? What is this time to market you're talking about? And we did. And you know what we found out? So if you have a supermarket, right? So they have headquarters where they have the central administration, they have the supermarkets where they sell stuff, they have customers like me, they have trucks that make sure that the carrots get to the supermarket, and then they have some factories where they package stuff, and they have the farmer out here, a happy farmer with a straw in his mouth. And he, by the way, is selling carrots. So that carrot needs to get to me, and the money and demands and so on, and customer information is going to get the other way. And so I said, how are we going? How is that building stuff in the data center? How is that going to help me buy carrots? And the funny thing, he said, well, it's developers yelling at me. Okay, let's put some developers in here. We'll give them a hat. They're propeller heads, right? Oh, I'm really bad today. So here are the developers who wanted to improve time to market. I said, how are the developers going to help me buy carrots or make the carrot buying experience better? And we talked to them, and they said, well, we have this app that's on people's cell phones. And the people who have the app and visit the supermarket every month, they spend 85 euros in the supermarket. The people who also visit our supermarket every week but don't have the app, they spend 45 euros per week in the supermarket. And I'm like, okay, so there's 40 euros difference in whether I have the app or not. So the question from this here customer really was, how do we move more people onto the app so that they will buy more stuff? And this here was a German supermarket chain. We found out that if we could move 100,000 Germans into using the app, already existing customers, we just needed to change their loyalty a little bit by having them use an app, that would give them an increased revenue of 42 million euros per year. Plus, it would protect them against the threat from Amazon making instant deliveries and so on in certain German areas. And that's sort of the conversation, because if I look at the data center guy and all the optimization we wanted to do here, he could probably have saved the effort of 3 people. And the developers, they would get some stuff faster. They would get access to some technologies and some automation that would help them. We could probably save another 3 FTEs here, and that would sort of justify the investment I was talking to them about. But going all the way through the chain, going, what is it actually we do when we impact the supermarket? And we ended up at, it's actually 42 million euros. We will be moving market share, percentage market share from one supermarket chain to another if we got this right. And before they got all this work, they were at, that was down here, 3.5 stars in the App Store before the developers built the new version. And now, where they have the new version, they are actually at 4.5 stars. So having all this automation and help with testing, and basically what we did was we reduced the time that developers need to spend on this here customer app, so that they could spend more time on making it nice and sexy and appealing.
And is
So
that
yes, go ahead.
I was really looking forward to our call because I knew that we would get into some diagrams, and that's a fun part of our conversation.
Yeah.
But the question is that concept of coming up with identifying that there's a huge potential increase in revenue that far exceeds any sort of cost savings or any of the other smaller, more minuscule type savings. Where does that project come from? Is that a project that comes from the value consulting or value engineering team, or is that, how does that actually emerge in the process of any one of your projects?
Okay, if we talk my projects, then I usually start with a person who works in automation, and that person has been asked to justify why they are there. Why are we spending money on licenses? Why are we spending money on hardware? Why do we spend money on you? And they have to
What can
justify
we
it.
automate?
Yeah,
Basically.
no, it's more like, I know we have automation, but I don't know if it's worth the money. So here's an interesting fact that I'm benchmarking my customers, and the very I would say for every hour they spend on automating and simplifying and digitizing stuff in the IT team or the automation team, because you can automate IT and you can automate the administration, you can automate procurement, you can automate how you pay your invoices, all that stuff. I'm looking at all of it going, where can we automate so it makes sense? So I end up with a person who is doing automation. And now I'm just being generic, just saying this guy or girl does automation. And the question then is, who cares about this automation? Because if I look at automation and say, well, we have some people over here doing accounts payable, so they pay invoices. Farmer sends an invoice and they send some money back. And that involves a lot of stuff like we ordered 100 carrots, so there's a purchase order, and then we received 100 carrots, so there is a receipt paper, and then there's an invoice that says 200 carrots. There's discrepancy. There's a lot of manual work going on to make this happen. And we can have a robot do that. We can place a robot here that will look at the purchase order and what was actually registered as received, and then we can go, it matches, pay it. We don't have to have a human in here. So the conversation often is about, okay, what do we do this? What saving do we have here? And so that is the business admin people. Usually what I see is if we spend, we'll give this person glasses, right? They sit behind a screen all day. So every time we spend 1 hour building automation, then we typically have 15 to 20 hours savings in the business administration. So these people who are doing invoices, they usually save 15 to 20 hours. That means if I have one person spending 40 hours on this, and you got 40 times as many savings up here. The very best of my customers, they are at somewhere between 70 to 100 hours here. And the worst of my customers, they just make 15 minutes or 3.5 hours or something. It's still worth it for them because they have a reduction in errors and response time, but they don't save effort. But the interesting thing is, I have another customer. They make large consumer goods. Their ability to pay invoices because of internal processes is not very good. So they pay very little on time. Now, if you were the person delivering raw materials or machinery or whatever to this here factory and company, if you don't get paid, what do you do then? You go, I'm not going to give you any more trees or lumps of iron or whatever you need to build your stuff. I'm just going to sit here and wait for you to deliver my money. So we have a very unfortunate chain here. So that guy won't deliver. That means we cannot manufacture. That means we cannot distribute. That means when I go in there to buy a new dishwasher, there is no dishwasher. So not paying your stuff on time has a
Knock-on
negative,
effect.
yes, it has a knock-on effect. So what we did was we did an analysis, and we are currently implementing. I must say, I cannot sign in blood that these numbers are correct, but we have this distribution supply chain administration team inside this company. They are looking at saving probably around 2 million euros per year in administrative work because they have this robot who does all this automation, so they don't have to type twice. They type and the blood springs from their fingers and they all turn all blue fingertips because type, and they make mistakes. There's so many things going wrong when you do it manually. So we looked at them and we said, if we automate what you're doing in this here supply chain team, you can save 2 million euros per year in salary. And then we said, but what's that actually going to mean for you as someone who delivers big, expensive things to consumers? It means that stuff will be on the shelves. And the point here is I can go in there and I can buy my dishwasher or my dining table or whatever I'm getting from them. And these 2 million savings, they're nice. But we were looking at plus 100 million expected increased revenue because they know exactly how many customers walk into the store every day and say, I would like the pink dining table. Oh, you don't have any? I'll just go over to the competitor. And there is a drainage, there is a loss, there is a leak of revenue because they had an internal process that didn't work. Then they had a leak of 100 million euros per year.
This must
So,
be a really fun type of work that you do, because automation is the name of the game today across everybody's looking to automate processes.
yep,
And the ability to obviously to do much more in depth, much more advanced automation today versus 5, 10 years ago is, is miles ahead of where we were before. And so
yep,
the sheer amount of opportunities that you can identify downstream, upstream, from even the most mundane of tasks, it's incredible.
yes. Yes, and back to that poor German guy who found me really annoying because I wanted him to talk to his colleagues. What I do is whenever I enter this project and I talk to this here person who is the automation person, and I say, okay, we're going to do this here project P1. That's what we're going to focus on. So we're going to do this, and then these guys are going to save some hours or maybe some cost of some kind. But who's giving them the task? What if we ask those who are handing it over, are they happy with the way it's being handed over? Could we improve that? Could they get a better interface? Could they get a portal? Could they get something that makes the handing over the task better? And then when they're done with their work, somebody is receiving it. Could we talk to those people receiving it, asking them, are you happy with the way that you receive whatever is the output? And this here opens up a completely different conversation. And yes, we find so many weird and interesting things. I was in a I cannot mention the details. I was in a workshop. We had like three teams visiting the same room on the same day. We were going to interview them, ask, well, how are you working? Why are you working that way? Could anything be better? And one of them came really early and sat through the first two teams. And when we got to that third team, the lady said, I came in here to talk to you about A, B, and C, but now I've listened to these two other teams. I found three things that we can do that would be much more valuable than what I came here to talk about. So that whole spill over of knowledge and so on, it is so inspiring. For
For
me, it's
sure.
fun, but don't tell my boss, right? So it's so much
So
fun to sit there. Yeah, go ahead, Martin.
I was just going to say, one of the things that I recall from one of our first conversations, maybe 6 months ago, is that you were focusing on this concept of reverse ROI. And
Yes.
I really stuck with me because ever since it's a bit like if you buy a red car, you suddenly see red cars everywhere. The
Hmm.
second that you shared with me this concept, which I'd love for you to share with the audience in a moment, in most of the discussions that we have from a SIMBI perspective with companies, a lot of it starts from that, because a lot of companies may not necessarily have very, very clear view of what is the actual value that they deliver.
Yep.
They may have some data somewhere in a few different isolated buckets or silos, but it's not completely clear. Most companies don't have a Forrester report or an
Hmm.
IDC report or what have you. And so I was really fascinated by this concept of this work that you do in reverse modeling, the reverse ROI. Would love for you to
Yep.
share a little bit how you do that and why it's so important.
Yes. So the reverse ROI is very similar to what I spoke about already, but usually my customers come to me and say, help, we've been doing this for a while and we don't know if it's worth it. So I was talking to a customer just last week. They make jewelry And I spoke to them about what they were doing, and we looked at so jewelry or carrots. It's sort of the same thing, right? You have stores, you have customers, you have distribution, you have not a farmer with carrots, but you have someone digging diamonds out of the Namibian desert or wherever they get them, and they have same thing. They have accounts payable, accounts receivable. They have procurement. They have all the finance stuff and the HR that we could automate. So she said she needed to prove the value of what they did as automation. And what we did was we went through. I said, okay, so what are you doing? Oh, we're going to save 10,000 hours in account payable. We're going to save 100,000 hours in this here team. And that means we just ended up with a long list of all these here automations, whatever the robot is doing, automation one, automation two, automation three. Basically, went through all these automations, saying, okay, this one, how many minutes does it save you as a company? The answer could be 15. Okay, how often does it run? 10 times every day. Okay, that's 150 minutes per day. Good. We can then put that and say, okay, 150 minutes per day. How long has it been running? Oh, this one was activated 10th of October, 2022. Now I have the value of that particular automation. This is so simple. Then we have some conversations about, did it run all the time? Does it run 100% correct? Are you getting 10% errors? You can do the carve out. And you said Forrester and something else, they always operate on industry averages. I always operate on the customer's own reality, because you can make it a lot shorter. I don't have to say, if you're a car manufacturer and you're in Germany and you have a subsidiary in the Czech Republic, and by the way, your cars have four wheels, I mean, then your outcome should be blah, blah, blah. No, I'd rather say, okay, how do you do this? Show me. Oh, you do it this way. I have a stopwatch. How many seconds does it take you? Tick, 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 tick. Okay, your value is. So it's a simple calculation based on what they do. Now, the lady with the jewelry company, we did all these calculations. The savings that they had was actually pretty impressive. And then I asked her, okay, but if I go and buy a necklace in one of your stores for my wife or my daughter or whoever deserves a necklace, how did you make my experience as a customer better? And I loved her for this. She did not blink. She said, we have taken away heavy equipment from each store, so it's prettier. When you walk in, you will find a beautiful shop that you walk into, because we have removed a lot of the clunky stuff. By the way, we have also improved the way that each store does end of the day reporting, so we know what's on the shelves, so we know what to replenish, we know what to send to each store. So when I walk in there, my favorite necklace is there. The distribution doesn't drive in circles, because they know exactly what is going to which store when. So she basically nailed it for the automation person. We're saving this many hours, and then the business admin is going to save so and so many hours. And then there's the C-level people. What are they interested in? Are they interested in whether your automation runs without errors? No. They just want to know, are we making more money? So the savings we made through this, they were okay, because somebody has a KPI of not hiring more finance people, but they made the whole process smoother. They made it easy to place an order and have the necklace produced and have it sent to whichever store it was going to. So she could say, without blinking, we have improved your experience as a customer by doing this and this and this. I said, okay, that is a reverse ROI that's worth talking about. I work with a pharmaceutical company. I'm running out of whiteboard now. Let me see. So I was working with this here pharmaceutical company, and they had an annual revenue of 17 billion, and the operating cost of running this here pharmaceutical company was around 14.5 billion. And then you had all these IT salespeople walking in, going, "We can help you save on your IT budget." And I'm like, "Yeah, the IT budget looked a bit like this." And the software that they were talking about was like this. So if I was a CEO, or any C or any kind of manager in this here pharmaceutical company, I would be so interested in impacting these two. But changing this one, it would be a rounding error compared to actually impacting the way that they do business, the way that they make their painkillers or whatever they're making. And that whole conversation, you asked, how did I get into doing business cases and the reverse ROI and stuff? This is it. Finding out, how do we make the pharmaceuticals better at making pharmaceutical? How do we make the furniture companies better at making furniture? And that is the interesting part. That's the big impact. And it's the interesting part because you get to talk to people here and here and here and here and here and help them actually get coherent as an organization. Oh dear, that sounded really arrogant. I talk to them and they sometimes find better things, ways of doing things.
No, it's fascinating. What I'm hearing from you also is that it feels like we're also in the early stages of automation where most people, including myself, the first thing you think about with automation is you think about operational efficiency as time reduction, right? And
Yep,
so it feels like the very first impression or idea that somebody will come to you with is, right, how do we make our company more efficient? And efficiency, people normally equate to savings. They equate more to savings than to growth or to increasing something. And
yep,
it's really fascinating how you turn it on its head, where you say there's really only a certain percentage that you can save, right? That
yep,
is quite finite because
yep,
that you're never going to get down to zero, right? So what can you save? And also savings a lot of the time has the negative connotation of reducing headcount. And, it's never the nicest area of conversation. In some cases it's very necessary, but it
yep,
feels like a very different conversation. We say, right, efficiency for growth or automation for growth. And it takes people the support of somebody like you to help them connect those dots about how one little automation can have this ripple effect and this expansion effect over a completely different area and a completely different part of the business.
yep. That is true. The first thing I usually do is that we talk about the efficiency gain. And then I said, okay, so are you looking to save money? Yeah, yeah, yeah. We need to save money. We need to be more efficient. We need to save money. I said, okay, are you going to fire anybody? And to your point, no, that's not the conversation we want to have. I said, okay, if you don't let anyone go, then you have zero savings. So we need to get the
Mhm.
concepts in place first. So I usually have this pie chart and I go, okay, so savings, we can take all this stuff and say, oh, look, we saved 150 hours or whatever it is, and say, did we fire anyone? No. Okay. Then it's not a saving. But one of my customers, they are growing like crazy internationally, and they are looking at me and saying, we know that we are going to double the number of incoming invoices because we are growing as much as we are, but we don't want to hire any more people. That's a cost avoidance. So the cost saving is I can take stuff out of my current budget. That's a saving. Not putting new money into next year's budget, that is a cost avoidance. And they go, yeah, yeah, that would be a good thing to communicate to my manager. Good. Let's look at cost avoidance and calculate that. The next thing that we look at is efficiency, internal efficiency or internal productivity. Because if you have a factory and people are making tables and chairs, so we have 100 people, or plows for that matter, we have 100 welders building plows, and next year we build twice as many plows, but still with 100 builders. We have doubled the productivity. Was there saving? No, we didn't fire anyone. Was there avoidance? No, because we were not planning to hire anyone. So we just produced more, which leads to the fourth part of the pie chart, revenue or outputs. And outputs, now we are so commercial, right? So I talk money and selling carrots and plows and so on. But if we were talking to a hospital, we're talking about how many people can we cure? Can we discharge people from a hospital bed a week earlier so we can have more people in hospital and make more people healthy. So if we're talking to the plow factory, revenue or productivity or outcome, strategic outcome would be sell more plows. And for the hospital, it would be make less people, reduce morbidity and reduce mortality so that we do what we do as a healthcare provider. And then you can go through every organization in the world and say, what are you trying to achieve? And how do we support that? So I save somebody here, I let 10 people go, I have a saving. I avoid hiring people next year. That's an avoidance. I weld more plows and send them into the world. That does have an impact on revenue, but it doesn't have to. We could reduce the price of a plow into half, or we could get hit by tariffs that we have to pay somewhere. There's so many things that doesn't equate productivity to revenue. So the last one is the revenue. It's the output. And again, that's the thing where I like to take the conversation. I know I have to do these here. Let's save some hours. Let's prove how many hours we saved. We need to do that. But in order to stay relevant and in order to focus our efforts where we make the best impact on the world, we need to look at the revenue or the ultimate goal of the organization and include that in the way we talk and think. Am I
And
making
how often?
sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. How often is it that when you do engage with a new customer, they, I guess, they're flexible enough to expand beyond, because they surely must come in with a very clear brief. This is what we want. We want to save X amount in this area. How
Yep.
often is it that you can get them to think way beyond what their original brief was?
They always think beyond. Now, if we always find the right person or persons who can help us get to
Yeah,
how do we impact carrot sales or plow production, we don't always get to that person. But I have never been in one of these conversations without my customer saying, yeah, that's actually what we should communicate. That is actually what we should measure. And I, sometimes I get management level to understand this is what you should measure. Sometimes I get the propeller heads, the developers, the automation people to understand, yep, that's what we should measure. And then there is a whole layer in the middle who should be the connection layer, but they are hampered by not so great KPIs. So instead of helping the top of the organization and the bottom of the organization to actually communicate, they go, that's not in my KPI, and then they resist. That usually takes some work to make them understand that they will actually look better if we do this. It won't
of
impact
course.
their output. But if you have a KPI, oh, I spoke with a hospital manager, IT manager in the US, and I asked him, what is your biggest goal? What is it you're aiming at? And he said, stay on budget. And I said, honestly, is that your top goal as CIO in a chain of hospitals? Is that stay on budget? And the guy said, yes, it is. And I said, okay, I'm from Denmark. The top goal for our IT teams is to help reduce morbidity and mortality by making sure the systems are up and running. We help research in the cancer department, so they have all these supercomputers where they can simulate how proteins interact. And at that point, he exploded in anger and told me I didn't understand four-letter word about his job and what was important. And I said, sorry. I called my boss and said, I think I pissed off one of our customers. And my boss said, okay, I did not hire you to not piss people off. Have a good evening. Bye. Which was an amazing boss, I must say, because
Mm.
he had seen the light. He knew we had to get to this here output conversation. And by the way, next morning I was at breakfast and the hospital manager, he found me. He walked up to me and he said, I'm really sorry I went crazy yesterday because you're absolutely right. And then he started telling me about all those days where they made two systems talk together and then they had helped do a liver transplant on a 14-year-old boy or whatever it was. So the point I was making was absolutely correct, even for
Yeah.
him. But he was under so much budget pressure that he sometimes had to look to the wrong focus area.
No, it's also ego sometimes gets in the way in those situations, right?
Yes, absolutely. For him, it was. I must say, I have deep respect for this guy. It was not ego that drove him. It was.
No, but in a moment when
Yeah,
you're yeah.
yeah. I can.
Tor,
Yes, yes.
this was illuminating. Honestly, I could talk on and on about this stuff, but we're near the end of the session. I did want to ask you two questions. They tend to be slightly uncomfortable questions, which is why we like to ask them. The first one is, who's the best value engineer or value consultant you've ever worked with?
Oft. That's easy. Dave Conrad.
You're not the first to say. and and why so? What makes Dave Conrad such a legend in the space?
That's a good question. He opened my eyes to the fact that the spreadsheets we use to show customers value, they should be easy to read, easy to understand, no clutter. They should be well defined. So the spreadsheets I make today are greatly inspired by Dave. And if you walk through them, they tell a story. It's not just
And
about gazillions of numbers, but it's telling a story. And then Dave is just a nice guy, which makes it easy to work with him.
yes, he's a great. I do know of a really good tool that can help with some of that value communication, but that's another story. Um,
Yes.
and on the value selling side, in terms of people that you've collaborated with on the sales side, who's the best value seller you've ever worked with?
Oh, I cannot pick one because I have had a few that really impressed me. So there's a Danish guy called Kim Hansen. He
Mm,
impressed me. We did multiple projects together, and he really impressed me as a person.
he's been on our fireside chat. It's
Oh, yes.
yeah, yeah, very impressive. We haven't published that one yet, but it's coming. Very impressive.
Okay. Yes. So Kim, I like. Then there is a guy who did an amazing job with public customers and defense called David Melgaard, a Danish guy. He is really amazing because he manages to keep that. Again, he's a nice guy. He does things in his spare time to make the world better. And this you're interested in me in making the world better. You see that throughout his work. It's not just about forking some licenses over the table. He sits down, he tries to understand what the customer is doing. And then I have a customer at the moment, a young lady called Eben. She looked at me like I was some kind of strange animal when I started talking value. And she has taken all the bait, and we are now running with it in all her customers. And I must say, her ability to understand and adapt has impressed me a lot. But those three would be the ones, the
Mm,
salespeople who impressed me the most because of the way they treat the customers and their ability to let me run with crazy ideas. And that makes cooperation really easy that we have that
yeah,
mutual respect. They can say, I need to do this. I need a spreadsheet that does so and so. And I can go, you can have that. But then I need to do some weird stuff on the whiteboard. And they go, yep,
it's the magic of the whiteboard. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. It's
it
a
is. It is.
hypnotic magic.
Yes.
Excellent, Tor. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed the call.
Likewise. Thank you very much.